You need to leave. This space isn't open to the public, especially not people who bring children. That was the first thing they said to her. Celeste Monroe didn't even get a hello. Her son, Xavier, 12 years old, looked up from the seat beside her, confused but trying to stay calm. "We're not the public, sir," he said softly. The security guard didn't blink. He stepped forward, ignoring the boy's words, and added louder this time, like he wanted everyone in the room to hear. "You're not supposed to be here!" Then, with one swift motion, he brushed past Xavier's arm, knocking the boy's tablet to the ground. It hit tile. Crack! The sound echoed like an insult. A pause followed, sharp and heavy. No one moved. No one apologized. And no one expected the woman in the soft navy coat to stay seated. Have you ever been humiliated in a place you helped build? Tell us where you're watching from, because in 10 minutes, this entire bank will find out exactly who she is. Monday, 10:17 a.m., Seattle, Washington. Celeste Monroe sat quietly in the digital infrastructure lounge of Lighthouse Capital Bank. No nameplate welcomed her. No assistant met her. Just a brushed metal wall, a glass door, and now a security guard who had just shoved her son aside like he didn't matter. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even stand. She turned to her son, who knelt now beside the tablet on the floor, inspecting the fractured screen. "You okay?" she asked gently. Xavier nodded, jaw clenched. A woman in pearls and a stiff gray blazer appeared, clipboard in hand, platinum smile, fake warmth. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to verify your credentials. This floor is restricted to executive tech clients and authorized personnel." Celeste looked up, calm as a cloud. "I have an appointment." "With who?" the woman asked. "David Klein, API director." The woman scanned her clipboard. "Sorry, I don't see your name listed." Celeste didn't flinch. "It's there." "Well, it's not showing up in our live system," she replied, voice clipped. Then she glanced at Xavier, and her smile tightened. "Also, we don't normally allow children in technical access zones, especially unattended minors." Celeste's eyes sharpened. "He's not unattended. He's with me." The woman looked her up and down. Buttonless coat, simple shoes, no visible company badge. Her voice cooled. "And you are?" "Celeste Monroe." The name didn't register. Not yet. The woman frowned, flipping pages. "Still not listed." Xavier tugged lightly on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered. "They scrubbed your name." Celeste gave a slight nod. Just enough for him to understand. He had seen this before, not exactly like this, but close enough. When systems changed after someone saw your face, when access mysteriously disappeared, when people decided you didn't belong. The security guard stepped back into the frame now, arms crossed. "Let's not cause a scene, all right? You're not in the system. You're not verified. That's the end of it." Celeste didn't answer. Instead, she reached inside her coat and pulled out a slim, black wristband, tapped it gently against the check-in sensor. Beep! A green light blinked, then red. Access denied. The woman in pearls smiled. "Looks like we were right." Celeste glanced at Xavier. He didn't wait for her to say anything. He plugged a short cable into his cracked tablet, then into a port beneath the table. The screen flickered, fractured but still functional. He typed with precision, then looked at her. She nodded once. Then he whispered, "Black Flag Protocol, Level 3. Confirm override." A soft sound chimed from the wristband. No one else heard it. But deep within Lighthouse's back-end systems, a message was relayed. Ethics Sync Core, the digital infrastructure that governed trust scoring, fraud detection, and behavioral patterning for 17 banks across the country, had just entered ethics lockdown mode. By the time the room noticed anything wrong, $780 million in active credit flows would already be suspended. Xavier sat back in his chair, silent, waiting. Celeste placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did good," she said quietly. He looked at her. Will they know it was us? She smiled faintly. Oh, they will. Not yet, but they will. From across the room, a younger black woman with a headset paused her typing. She looked up slowly. Her eyes widened. I'm sorry. Did you say your name was Celeste Monroe? Pearl Earrings rolled her eyes. That's what she said. The young woman stood up. You're the CEO of Zenith Systems? Now Pearl looked alarmed. Zenith? That's not possible. Celeste turned toward her, fully now. I'm not here for a meeting, she said, her voice still calm. I'm here for a test, and you failed it in under 4 minutes. The security guard took a half step back. Ma'am, if you're someone important, maybe you should have announced. I don't announce, Celeste interrupted. I verify. The infrastructure manager, a man in a navy vest, rushed in, clearly summoned by the call logs. He froze when he saw her. Ms. Monroe, she raised a hand. Don't. Then, you scrubbed my name this morning. I came here unannounced on purpose. Your team's reaction told me everything I needed to know. The guard shifted nervously. Xavier turned the tablet around on the table. The screen displayed a familiar symbol. Ethics Sync's control panel. Live. Locked. Mom, he said. System-wide freeze confirmed. 5 banks affected. 112 flagged flows. API access suspended. Celeste nodded. Begin the ledger trace. The room was still. Then Pearl spoke, panic-hid. You can't do that. You'll crash our pipeline. Celeste finally stood. She looked across the room, at every face watching her like they had just realized the air had changed. I didn't crash anything, she said. I corrected what was already broken. The air inside the digital infrastructure lounge had shifted. Gone was the artificial calm, the professional smiles, the buttoned-up tone. What remained now was the kind of silence that clings to the skin, a heavy, waiting kind, the kind people feel right before something breaks. Celeste Monroe stood at the head of the room, composed, deliberate. With one hand resting on the chair her son Xavier had just vacated. He was behind her now, scanning the flickering lines of data on his cracked tablet like a surgeon reviewing vitals. Lines turned red. Dozens. Then hundreds. The Ethics Sync core system had fully engaged its Black Flag protocol. Across 5 major banks, including Lighthouse, critical trust evaluations were failing to validate. Without trust scores, there were no credit decisions, no AI approvals, no automated fund flows. Everything was on hold, $780 million frozen, and that was just the beginning. The man in the navy vest, branch infrastructure manager David Klein, stepped forward, hands slightly raised, like approaching a ledge. Ms. Monroe, he said carefully, whatever is happening here, we can sort it out. I don't believe the situation requires… Requires what? Celeste asked, not moving. He hesitated. A full systems freeze. She raised an eyebrow. A freeze I didn't initiate. A freeze your team triggered when you decided to erase me from your system. David glanced around. Several of his staff avoided eye contact. Pearl Earrings was no longer smiling. Her clipboard hung limp at her side. The security guard stood stiff near the wall now, shifting weight between his boots. I wasn't the one who erased anything, David muttered. Celeste didn't answer him. She turned to Xavier. Display the log? He pressed a key. A holographic interface blinked to life above the desk. Everyone could see it now. 9:42 a.m. System edit log, user decline. Action, delete appointment, user access clearance. Target ID, Monroe, CE01 Zenith. David's face drained. That can't be right. That wasn't intentional. It never is, Celeste said. It's always a glitch, or miscommunication, or some vague, bureaucratic shrug that hides behind systems designed to erase people who don't look like you expect. Nobody said a word. Then The younger black woman with the headset, Jaslyn, according to her ID badge, stepped forward. "I recognized her name the second she said it," she said softly. "I follow Zenith's public research. She's one of the top 10 infrastructure architects in the country." Pearl tried to interrupt. "Well, she didn't look—" The room snapped toward her. Even the guard stiffened. "You were saying?" Celeste asked. Pearl swallowed her words and sat down. David wiped a hand across his forehead. "Look, Ms. Monroe, I don't know what you want, but if this is retaliation, it's hurting a lot of people." Celeste turned to him slowly. "I didn't come here to retaliate. I came here to observe." She walked toward the wall where the Trust Score dashboard had been installed, a live monitor of financial behavior patterns and customer movement across all 5 partner banks. The screen now showed gray status bars: frozen, disabled. "Do you know what this screen told me last week?" Celeste asked. David shook his head. That 84% of high-risk flags issued from this branch were linked to women of color. That 2/3 of those flags were never manually reviewed before being auto-escalated to compliance. She paused. "And you know how I found that out?" He didn't respond. She pointed to Xavier. "He built the algorithm that traced your pattern. He's 12. The silence cracked. From the far side of the room, a thin, red-headed analyst finally spoke. We've had issues with the bias filters not calibrating across all risk tiers." "That's what you're going with?" Celeste said sharply. "A filter?" She stepped forward, voice still low, but harder now. "You erased my name. You shoved my son. You denied us access to a building that runs on a system I wrote and funded. And now you want to tell me it's a software issue?" Her voice never rose, but the tremor in it, controlled, bitter, precise, filled the room like a verdict. Xavier was typing again, his fingers steady. The screen on his tablet showed an increasing number of trust cascade collapses, chain reactions where bad data multiplied across sub-branches. He looked up. "Mom, 32 more flows just failed review. Total flagged now at 112. System integrity at 18%. Pearl stood again, flustered. "You're crashing the bank?" "No," Celeste said. "You crashed it the moment you decided my presence was a threat." In the back corner, the young woman, Jaslyn, raised her voice. "She's right. This isn't the first time we've done this." Everyone looked at her. "I watched a customer last week get denied access because she didn't meet presentation expectations." She had a degree in applied mathematics. She was wearing sneakers. Pearl scoffed. "We have standards." Celeste turned to her again. "Your standards are built on exclusion. They're not standards. They're filters. Polished, polite, and poisonous." David Klein looked like he was about to faint. And then, the phone rang. A hard line. Red indicator blinking on the wall. One of the staff answered. After 10 seconds, she turned pale and handed it to David. He listened, then slowly looked toward Celeste. "That was our corporate chief of ethics compliance," he said shakily. "They've been alerted. They said Ethics Sync flagged our entire branch for behavior pattern irregularities and pending audit lockdown." Celeste nodded. "Yes, I triggered it. You have that authority?" "Under federal fintech infrastructure law, I built and certified the very system you're running on. You know what that means?" She stepped forward, eyes locked. "It means I can shut you down. Ethically, legally, and permanently." Xavier glanced up from the tablet again. "Mom, they're trying to override the lockout. It's not working." She smiled faintly. "Of course it's not. Because for the first time, they're answering to a protocol, not a person they can ignore." She turned back to the room. "I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm here to end something systemic, something intentional, and I'm starting here because this room tried to erase me." Jaslyn stepped closer. "What happens next?" she asked. Celeste didn't answer at first. She looked at Xavier. He spoke instead. "You signed something." David blinked. "Sign what?" Xavier pulled up the file. An elegant, clean document titled Veritas Accord, Ethics Protocol for AI-Governed Banking Systems. Author, Xavier Monroe, age 12. Celeste finally spoke. This document was submitted to your board last year, rejected, labeled idealistic, and too accountability-focused. She stepped back. You're going to sign it now, and not just you, your regional heads, your partners, and your executive council, because the system that makes your decisions now demands it. David sat down. For the first time, he looked tired, not defensive, just broken. I'll call them. Celeste nodded. You'll do more than that. You'll broadcast it, because today, this isn't a meeting. This is a reckoning. And with that, she turned back to Xavier and nodded once. He tapped the screen. The broadcast setup began loading. 5 banks, 17 compliance officers, 100 eyes now tuning into what had started with 1 tablet and 1 wrong assumption. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. Xavier's tablet glowed on the desk, the broadcast sequence initializing. Streaming the live protocol override session to 17 compliance officers from 5 major banks. The digital silence in the room clashed with the panic tightening in people's faces. Celeste Monroe stood calmly at the front of the lounge, not holding a microphone, not issuing commands, just being there and letting the truth do its work. And now, everyone else was scrambling to figure out what truth they'd just stepped into. David Klein, the branch manager, leaned forward in his chair, elbows on knees, hands pressed together like a man praying quietly before the impact. Is it too late to stop the broadcast? He asked. Xavier looked up, thoughtful, then shook his head. Ethics Sync only permits emergency overrides in cases of national security or infrastructure breach, and neither of those apply to what just happened here. He turned his screen slightly toward the room. So no, it's already live. At the far end of the room, Jaslyn, the junior systems analyst who had first recognized Celeste's name, let out a slow breath. I never thought I'd see it actually fire, she whispered. The Black Flag Protocol. I thought that was just internal myth. Celeste glanced at her. It was designed to be real enough that people would never force it to activate. Jaslyn nodded. But they did. Across the room, Pearl sat frozen. Her hands were locked together tightly on her clipboard, her knuckles bone white. This is insane, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. All of this over a name, a schedule mix-up, a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, another voice cut in from the back. Everyone turned. It was Luis Marquez, a middle-aged Latino man in a charcoal suit, an independent wealth manager who had quietly observed everything from the corner since the first minute. Luis stood now, slowly. She's not here because of one incident. She's here because this branch has been doing this for a long time. I've seen it. Pearl blinked. Doing what? Luis looked at her. Filtering people, based on tone, dress, accent, posture. He turned to Celeste. I never said anything. I thought silence was safe. Celeste met his eyes. It never is. And then another voice, this time from near the espresso bar. An older black woman, dressed in a soft lavender jacket, stood slowly. Her voice was quiet, raspy. I came here 3 months ago to open an investment rollover. They told me I'd need a co-signer. She laughed once, a bitter, broken sound. I'm 71. I owned my own business for 40 years. I had liquid cash, but you know what I didn't have? She looked at Pearl. A last name you'd respect. Pearl shifted, mouth slightly open. David Klein pressed his palms against his forehead. His voice cracked. Oh God, this was all happening under me. Celeste turned to him, and for the first time, her tone softened. It wasn't just under you. It was enabled by you. Whether you looked away or let it happen slowly over time, it happened. And now it's being seen. Xavier tapped his tablet. Broadcast is now visible to 4,200 internal viewers, compliance officers, HR executives, partner banks. Some media IPs just joined too. From the wall near the security exit, a new voice joined. Marcus White, one of the tech consultants who usually sat behind firewalls and never spoke in public meetings, cleared his throat. He didn't look angry, just tired. "I coded the override delay for this system when it was first piloted," he said quietly. "They told me it was just a safety net, not something we'd ever actually use." He looked straight at Celeste now. "You just proved we were wrong." At that moment, a phone buzzed, loud, harsh. Pearl jumped, snatched it from her bag. She glanced at the screen, turned pale, and quickly silenced the call. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Corporate?" Pearl nodded slowly. "They want to know why over 70 flagged complaints from this branch just surfaced in the National Audit Database." David's head shot up. "What complaints?" Pearl didn't answer. Celeste turned to Xavier. "Pull the log." Xavier tapped. A new window opened. Branch, Lighthouse Capital, Seattle. Suppressed complaints 78. Filed by clients identifying as Black, 41, Latino, 17, Asian, 9, Other, 11 flagged by system as suppressed. True manual override detected. Yes, initial suppression. User, Pearl. Marshall, Pearl's mouth opened. "That's not... I didn't mean to suppress complaints. I thought they were false. Duplicate. Misfiled." "No," Celeste said, voice cold now. "You thought they didn't matter." The silence that followed was different. Not shock, recognition. The people in the room weren't just realizing what had happened. They were realizing how often they'd let it happen. Louise stepped forward. "I can't stay silent anymore. I want to file an official statement, on the record." The older woman in lavender nodded. "So do I." Celeste turned to Jaslyn. "You said you recognized my work." Jaslyn straightened. "I've read the Veritas Accord 5 times." "Good," Celeste said. "You'll help deliver it." Suddenly, the door to the lounge burst open. 2 suited men entered, wearing corporate tags, regional compliance officers, red folders in hand, eyes wide. "Who initiated the broadcast?" one demanded. "I did," Xavier said, not flinching. The man blinked. "Who are you?" "He's the author of the document your board rejected last year," Celeste replied, stepping beside her son. "And the reason you're all here now." The officer narrowed his eyes. "You've triggered a system-wide ethics audit. Do you understand what kind of liability that places on our firm?" Celeste tilted her head. "You're worried about liability? You should be worried about legitimacy." The man opened his folder, but she cut him off. "You'll want to save that speech," she said. "There are over 4,000 people watching this in real time, and the moment you speak, your words become part of the permanent review." He froze. Xavier raised the tablet slightly. 5 minutes until full lockdown timer expires. Then all flagged complaints will become part of the public compliance chain. Immutable record." Jaslyn stepped forward now, her voice clear, firm. "This branch has silenced people for years. This isn't a glitch. It's a culture. And today, we're ending it." Pearl sat down slowly. For the first time, she looked small. Really small. Not just demoted, not just exposed. Unraveled. Celeste turned to the room. "If you're ready to rebuild something better, then we start with signing the document my son wrote. Not because he's 12, not because he's mine, but because he saw something all of you missed." She paused. "That systems built on silence will always crash." The red folder trembled slightly in the regional compliance officer's hand. Everyone in the room noticed it, not because he was shaking, but because for the first time, someone from corporate wasn't in control. Celeste Monroe stood at the center of the lounge, Xavier beside her, a dozen staff, clients, and observers around them, watching, listening, waiting. On the broadcast, more viewers joined by the minute. The number in the corner of Xavier's tablet now read 6,310 connected devices, including regulatory agencies, senior partners, and board members from across the banking alliance. And in the middle of it all sat one open document, projected onto the wall. The Veritas Accord Ethics Framework for AI-Governed Financial Institutions, written by Xavier Monroe, age 12. The older of the two officers, stern-faced, with a deep-lined forehead and salt-gray hair, cleared his throat. "This document is not on any approved rollout schedule," he said, tone clipped. "It hasn't been reviewed by our Federal Compliance Committee or Ethics Review Board." Celeste replied, "You had 14 months to review it. It was submitted, rejected, and archived." "Because it was drafted by a child," the younger officer blurted. Celeste didn't react. Xavier, however, took a half step forward. "Then how is it that the systems you use every day are built on my frameworks?" No one answered. "I'm 12. I get it," Xavier continued, voice steady. "But data doesn't care about age. It cares about accuracy, about truth." The younger officer opened his mouth again, but stopped, because in that moment, for all his years of training, he realized something terrifying. The kid was right. Celeste stepped forward now, calm but unflinching. "You rejected the Veritas Accord because it required something no one in your tier wanted to commit to: traceable accountability. Every flag, every override, every denial of service tied to a human signature." She turned to Pearl. "That means someone like her," she nodded, "can't hide behind default filters or automated workflows. Every decision is now human." Pearl stared at the floor. David Klein, still seated, buried his face in his hands. "Celeste," he murmured, "I didn't know this was coming. I swear." She looked at him. "That's the point. It shouldn't have had to come to this, but your silence and your system made it necessary." Jaslyn, standing beside the main display screen, turned to the officers. "If you don't sign this accord today, your systems stay frozen. We've confirmed the lockdown reaches 5 institutions, 4 core partner banks, and 2 investment platforms. That affects over $4.8 billion in pending transactions." The older officer swallowed hard. "You're threatening the financial stability of an entire region." "No," Celeste said. "You did that when you gave unchecked bias a passcode and called it protocol." Xavier tapped the tablet. The broadcast camera refocused on the signature field at the bottom of the Veritas Accord. He spoke clearly. "The document requires 3 signatures to trigger Phase 1 compliance adoption. 1 from executive oversight, 1 from regional operations, and 1 from ethics compliance." Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Who's first?" No one moved. Then Jaslyn stepped forward. "I'll sign." The room turned. "I'm not an executive, but I'm a systems analyst. I've been forced to sit silent for too long, cleaning up the back end while people like Pearl rewrote the front end to exclude clients who didn't look ideal." She picked up the stylus. Her hand didn't shake. Signature accepted. The screen blinked green. The older officer looked around. Then, slowly, reluctantly, he stepped forward. I was there when the original version of this document was reviewed last year. I remember I flagged it as philosophical." He paused. "I was wrong." He signed. Signature accepted. 2 down. Everyone looked to the younger officer. He hesitated. "Do I even have authority to sign this?" Xavier shrugged. "If you're worried about authority, you probably shouldn't be in charge of ethics." A few quiet chuckles from the staff. The man flushed, but reached forward and signed. Signature accepted. The screen changed. Phase 1 compliance initiated. Veritas Accord active. The moment wasn't loud. It didn't erupt in applause. It settled, like weight shifting, like a wall crumbling behind drywall. Everyone could feel it. Something had changed, and it wasn't going back. Pearl looked up, her voice hoarse. "What happens to us now?" Celeste answered gently, but clearly. "You'll be investigated. Fully. Every override, every suppressed complaint, every staff incident swept under the rug." Pearl looked like she might cry. Xavier added, "But for what it's worth, I hope you stay, because people like you should see the systems you broke, rebuilt right in front of you. It wasn't said with venom, just truth. Pure, simple, unavoidable. In the corner, the elderly black woman in lavender stepped forward. I'd like to be part of the rebuild, however I can. Luis, the Latino advisor, nodded. Me too. Celeste smiled, for the first time all day. Then we begin here, in this room. Jaslyn opened a second file, Veritas Local Implementation Log, and turned the screen toward the team. We'll need volunteers, staff leads, liaisons with community organizations, new review board members. People started raising their hands. Not everyone, but enough. Then, from behind the double glass doors, a new figure stepped inside. Dark gray suit, quiet stride. Elliot Rhodes, senior ethics advisor from the National Banking Federation. He didn't speak right away. He simply looked around the room, then at the broadcast tablet, then at Celeste. I saw the whole feed, he said. And? Elliot smiled, faintly, but with clarity. It's about damn time. Celeste hadn't left the bank yet. She was still standing near the center of the lounge, her coat folded over her arm, when Xavier's tablet pinged again. Mom, he said, glancing up from the screen. You might want to see this. She took the device. It was no longer just a live stream. Now it was the top trending news item on 4 major media outlets. Black CEO's son freezes $780 million after bank denial. Forces ethics overhaul in real time. The headline itself would have been enough, but what came next was something else entirely. Clips were everywhere, from multiple angles, Pearl stiffening as Celeste refused to leave. Xavier calmly listing suppressed complaints. Jaslyn saying, I'll sign first. The 3 blinking green check marks of the Veritas Accord activation. The moment Elliot Rhodes walked in and said, It's about damn time. TikTok, YouTube, CNN, Bloomberg, even Reddit, all talking about one thing. Who is Xavier Monroe, and what is the Veritas Accord? At that moment, the glass doors to the bank slid open again. A local reporter stepped in, camera crew just behind her. Excuse me, Miss Monroe, she asked, mic raised. We're from Como 4 News. Could we get a quick comment about what just happened? Celeste didn't smile. She didn't pose. She just looked the woman in the eye and said, No comment at this time, but you're welcome to stay. Transparency's part of the process. Then she turned back to Xavier. How's the system holding? He nodded. Stable, no data breaches. Lockdown protocol is clean. Ethics relays holding across all 6 linked banks. But what? Xavier looked uneasy. Some executives are pushing back, trying to discredit the Accord. Across the country, in New York, at the private executive boardroom of Riverpoint Capital, the CEO sat tapping his pen furiously. We cannot, he growled, allow a 12-year-old boy to dictate regulatory compliance for a $94 billion industry. His general counsel cleared her throat. With respect, sir, it's not just the boy. The system he designed flagged 41 ethics violations in our own platform. All logged, all time-stamped. The room fell quiet. Then, someone at the end of the table murmured, If we don't sign on to Veritas, we could be flagged next. The public already thinks we're complicit. Silence. Then, draft a statement. Now. Meanwhile, back in Seattle, Jaslyn was coordinating the first implementation session. I'll need 4 staffers to start reviewing account denial histories. I want patterns, trends, anything that shows automated exclusion. Luis raised a hand. I can help. So did the older black woman from earlier. My nephew's a data scientist. I'll get him on this. The broadcast feed was still running, now with over 15,000 live viewers. And in a small window on screen, a public vote had appeared. Should the Veritas Accord be mandated nationally? Yes, 92% no, 8%. Celeste didn't ask for applause. She just walked to the break room. poured herself a cup of plain black coffee, and leaned against the counter. "Is this how revolutions start?" she asked softly. Xavier shrugged. "Feels more like system restoration." She looked at him and smiled. "Same thing." At 11:42 a.m., the Federal Ethics Advisory Board issued a short but sharp statement. The board is officially reviewing the Veritas Accord, its authorship, and its immediate effects on ethical oversight within the banking sector. Until further notice, all banks connected to the Ethics Sync Core network are advised to observe provisional compliance with the Accord's active protocols. 4 minutes later, True North Bank issued a public apology. Then Gold Spring Financial followed. Then Centura Partners. By 12:30 p.m., 7 regional banking CEOs had posted public statements supporting the rollout. But there were holdouts. In Atlanta, an executive from Loyal First Bank appeared on live TV saying, "We do not believe in being governed by viral sentiment. Ethics should be reviewed by seasoned professionals, not children." That clip was shared and ripped apart within hours. Thousands replied, "You weren't complaining about automation when it helped you deny black and brown applicants. A kid just designed a better system than your entire firm. You're not mad because it's wrong. You're mad because you can't hide behind it anymore." By that evening, Loyal First lost 2 major investor partners. Stock down 7.6%. Inside the bank in Seattle, a quiet moment finally arrived. Xavier sat on the floor, legs crossed, sipping orange juice from a paper cup. Celeste looked down at him. "You okay?" He nodded. "Tired, but yeah. You changed something today." Xavier didn't respond immediately, then said, "I didn't want to go viral, Mom. I just wanted them to stop hurting people." Celeste crouched next to him. "I know," she said, "but sometimes the truth echoes." They sat in silence a moment longer. Then Jaslyn called out, "They want you upstairs. One of the regional VPs just flew in." As they stepped into the elevator, Celeste glanced down at her phone. A message had just come through. From Elijah Monroe. Subject, "Proud of you both. I have something to share soon." Xavier saw it too. "Dad texted?" Celeste nodded. "We'll talk about that later." The oak-paneled conference room on the 46th floor of the Valor Tower in Manhattan was not listed in any official directory. No sign on the door, no camera, no keycard entry. But inside, 6 men sat, each in tailored suits, each with decades of power behind their names. They weren't CEOs. They were chairmen, founders, and private equity titans. The kind of men who never appeared in headlines unless they wanted to. The kind of men who didn't ask for change. They bought it, killed it, or buried it. And today, for the first time in years, they were nervous. "Tell me," said Marshall Devane, chairman of True Delta Holdings, "how in God's name did a 12-year-old black kid create the most disruptive ethics protocol we've seen since the post-2008 regulations?" Nobody answered right away. Then Victor Lang from Easton Capital exhaled. Because he wasn't building it for compliance, he was building it to protect people like his mother. A pause, then laughter, dry, clipped, bitter. Marshall wasn't amused. He just cost us $780 million in frozen transactions and triggered a government ethics review. Across the room, Douglas Shin from Meridian Trust leaned forward. "We need to get ahead of this before it spreads further. The public's eating it up. They think this kid's the next prophet of corporate morality." Victor smirked. "They're not wrong." Douglas shot him a look. "That's the problem." On the screen behind them, a headline rotated silently. Veritas Accord goes viral, 14 banks under emergency review. Another flashed. Seattle CEO denied at bank, now leading industry-wide ethics overhaul. And finally, is the Monroe family rewriting American finance? That one hit a nerve. "Control the narrative," Marshall snapped, "before we lose it completely." Victor leaned back, fingers steepled. "We've already lost it, but we can still win the game." Meanwhile, back in Seattle, Xavier sat with Jocelyn and Luis in a quiet co-working room above the branch. They were reviewing data patterns, racial bias overlays, denial clustering, automated flagging based on surnames. "You seeing this?" Jocelyn asked. "Every override issued by Pearl in the last 6 months targeted surnames like Nguyen, Johnson, Mohammed, and Hernandez." Xavier shook his head. "It's not just individuals. It's built into the pipeline." Luis frowned. "And we fed it every time we didn't question it." Silence. Then Xavier looked up. "We fix it, brick by brick." Downstairs, Celeste stood with Elliot Rhodes, the senior ethics advisor who had quietly joined her team. "I'm not naive," she said. "You know these men won't just fold. They'll regroup, strike back harder." Elliot nodded. "They already are." She raised an eyebrow. Elliot pulled up a secured message on his phone. "Private communication. Easton Capital. Activate counterop. Discredit framework. Target legal vulnerabilities in data protocol. Push false narrative of regulatory overreach. Leak Celeste's 2008 acquisition history." Celeste didn't blink. "I wondered when they'd bring up that old merger." Flashback. 2008. She had led the hostile acquisition of Novacor Analytics, a move that wiped out several board members and earned her the nickname the Quiet Axe. It was brutal, legal, and clean. But it made enemies. Enemies with long memories. Back in the present, Celeste looked out the glass wall of the branch. "They'll dig through everything. My career, my past, my son." Elliot nodded. "They'll try to paint him as a child pawn. You as the puppet master." She smirked. "Then let them. I don't need to defend the truth. I built it." Elsewhere that same day, a leaked document landed in the inboxes of 3 national financial media editors. A confidential dossier on Xavier Monroe, falsely labeling him as a tool used by fringe activists to manipulate AI ethics for political gain. But something unexpected happened. The public didn't buy it. On Reddit, one user wrote, "Y'all mad that a black kid outcoded your whole compliance department." On TikTok, Veritas, your outdated HR training slides. On LinkedIn, what we're witnessing is not child exploitation, it's generational repair. At 7:42 p.m., Celeste stood at her home office window, overlooking downtown Seattle. She hadn't spoken on camera yet, but that was about to change. She turned to Xavier. "Are you sure you're okay with this? Going public as the author?" Xavier didn't hesitate. "They already know, but they don't understand." She smiled. "Then let's help them." The next morning, a video dropped. Not from CNN, not from the banks, but from the Monroe home. "My name is Xavier Monroe. I'm 12 years old. I wrote the Veritas Accord not to punish the system, but to make it worthy of people like my mom. We're not perfect, but we can be better. This isn't a war, it's a rebuild." The video had 2.6 million views in under 5 hours. Back in Valor Tower, Marshall Duvain slammed the remote down. They turned it into a movement. Victor Lang, calm as ever, poured himself another scotch. "Exactly, which means brute force won't work." "Then what do you suggest?" Victor smiled. "We infiltrate." The takedown wasn't loud. It was precise. By Wednesday morning, Celeste's inbox was flooded, not with congratulations, but with concerns. The first was a headline from a well-known business journal. "Xavier Monroe's Code, Genius or Ghost Written." The second came from a right-leaning news outlet. "Corporate Reform or Child Manipulation. Critics question Monroe family motives." And the third, a slick, high-production smear video labeled, "Inside the Veritas Agenda, What They Don't Want You to Know." Within it, clips of Xavier spliced with ominous music. A narrator questioning whether a 12-year-old could really understand financial systems. False claims that the Veritas Accord had caused layoffs and banking freezes hurting real families. A blurred image of Celeste at a 2008 merger table. Voiceover calling her a corporate executioner in heels. At the Valor Tower war room, Marshal Duvain leaned back, satisfied. We don't have to beat them with facts. We just have to muddy the waters. Douglas Shin nodded. Public fatigue, distrust. It'll wear them down. Victor Lang, unusually quiet, finally spoke. Just don't touch the kid directly. But the others had already moved on. Meanwhile, in Seattle, Xavier stared at his phone. The hate comments were multiplying. So were the threats. Mommy made your code for you. Go back to Minecraft, junior activist. This is why kids don't belong in policy. He tried not to let it show, but Celeste saw the tension in his jaw. She reached over. Hey. He looked up. They don't get to define you, she said. You already did that when you stood up for people who had no voice. He nodded, but his eyes were glassy. Then Luis rushed in. We have a bigger problem. He dropped his laptop on the table, screen facing them. A back door had been found inside the Ethics Sync core platform. It was subtle, a buried data override protocol, created before Celeste had even taken over Zenith Systems. A legacy code. And it had just been exposed on a tech forum, framed as if Xavier had built it himself. Jaslyn cursed under her breath. This is a setup. Xavier looked devastated. But I didn't, Celeste cut in. We know, and we'll prove it. But the court of public opinion doesn't wait for the facts. Luis frowned. This is going to taint everything. Even if we patch it, they'll say Veritas was always corrupted. Jaslyn added, This is a coordinated strike, and it's not just about you. They're trying to break trust in the system, in us, in the idea that we can fix anything. At that exact moment, a private email was leaked to several journalists. An internal memo from Easton Capital stating, Our legal team is exploring the immediate suspension of all Veritas-linked ethical protocols until a full independent audit is conducted. We cannot place our fiduciary duties in the hands of an unverified AI created by a child. The headlines exploded. Audit demanded of Veritas. Is Xavier's code a national risk? Banks begin quiet exit from Accord. Ethics freeze may end. Monroe family silent as backdoor breach rocks industry. The worst came when Xavier's middle school principal called. I'm sorry, she said, trying to sound composed, but with the media attention and now safety concerns, we recommend remote learning for the foreseeable future. Xavier said nothing, just turned off his phone. Celeste sat beside him, unsure whether to pull him close or let him breathe. At 3:11 p.m., a text came in from Elliot Rhodes. We have a leak. From inside Zenith. Possibly someone you promoted last year. I'm digging. Celeste's face hardened. They're trying to turn my own house against me. Later that evening, she gathered everyone in the same boardroom where Xavier first launched the Accord. Let's be honest, she began. This isn't just resistance. It's a full-blown counterattack. She looked at each face in the room. They can't defeat the framework, so they're trying to destroy the boy who built it. She paused, her voice low now. Break the boy, break the system. That's their strategy. Jaslyn asked the question no one dared. Should we pause the rollout? Silence. Then Xavier stood up. No. He was shaking, but his voice was clear. If we pause now, they win. They get to say it was too much, too soon, too naive. I didn't build Veritas to be perfect. I built it because they never were. He looked at his mom. If this is about protecting me, then let me finish what I started. On my terms. Celeste blinked slowly, then nodded. Okay. She turned to Elliot. Leak countermeasures, legal firewalls, independent validators. I want public transparency audits from 3 universities. Luis added, Let's get the original architecture peer-reviewed. Celeste looked around. No more waiting. We don't defend the truth anymore. We publish it. Across the country, protesters began forming at the headquarters of banks known to reject Veritas. Handmade signs read, We deserve ethical banking. Shame isn't a strategy. Protect the kid. Back the code. And in front of Zenith Systems in Seattle, something unexpected. A small group of tech developers knelt silently. holding laptops, screens facing the sidewalk. One by one, they loaded the Veritas source code and pressed run, a quiet act of digital defiance. Celeste watched from the 12th floor window, her voice barely above a whisper. They thought they were killing a code. She turned to Xavier. But they might have just awakened a generation. At exactly 9 a.m. the next day, Celeste Monroe walked into the Zenith Systems executive floor, not as a CEO, not as a mother, as a threat. The air was tense. Assistants avoided eye contact. Executives stopped mid-conversation when she passed. She moved fast, silent, purposeful. Inside the conference room, Elliot Rhodes was already waiting. He had pulled the surveillance logs, employee access trails, and IP tracebacks. One name flashed on screen: Tina Aldridge, Senior VP of Infrastructure. Celeste didn't blink. She's the one who inserted the legacy override into the test instance? Elliot nodded. And she's been in quiet communication with Eastern Capital for months. Celeste stood still for a beat, then turned to her assistant. Bring her in. Minutes later, Tina walked in, perfectly composed, as if nothing was wrong. Celeste didn't offer a seat. She pressed a button. The screen behind her came alive. Internal messages, code commits. A masked account traced back to Tina's home IP address. Evidence undeniable. Tina tried to play dumb. What is this? Celeste cut her off. You sabotaged a compliance framework designed to protect vulnerable people. You did it to protect institutions built on bias, and worst of all, you dragged my son into it. Silence. Celeste stepped closer. You don't work here anymore. Tina opened her mouth. Celeste raised her hand. Security is waiting outside. The door opened. 2 officers walked in. Tina's composure cracked. I was told to do this by the board. You don't get it, Celeste. These people, they own the system. Celeste's voice was calm, cold. No, they rent it, but I build the next one. Later that afternoon, in front of a packed press conference streamed live from Zenith headquarters, Celeste Monroe stepped up to the podium. For the first time, she wasn't speaking as a CEO. She was speaking as a mother. Let's be clear, she began, her voice steady. This isn't about a code. It's about control. She paused. My son, Xavier, created the Veritas Accord because too many people in this country have been told no for the wrong reasons. Because of the way they look, the name on their ID, the zip code on their application. She held up a flash drive. This is every line of that code, now open source, validated, and reviewed by 3 independent academic institutions. Transparent, public, unstoppable. The audience murmured. Celeste leaned in. If you touch my son, I touch your system. Not through lawsuits, not through headlines, through reform. The clip went viral within minutes. Across social media, the phrase spread like fire. If you touch my son, I touch your system. It appeared on protest signs, hoodie prints, and TikTok audios. By nightfall, it was a trending hashtag in 17 countries. Inside the Valor Tower in New York, the banking elite watched in silence. Marshall Devane stared at the screen. We underestimated her. Victor Lang didn't respond. He was reading another alert. Bank of Metro pulls out of anti-Veritas coalition, followed by 2 board members at Eastern Capital resign in protest. Douglas Shin slammed his fist on the table. They're folding. Marshall's jaw clenched. We still have the compliance veto. We can blacklist Zenith's framework through the FDIC review board. Victor looked up. Then they'll take it to the public. You think Congress wants to be the face of killing a civil rights protocol written by a kid? Back in Seattle, Xavier sat on the rooftop deck at home, staring at the city skyline. He looked older this week, not in years, in weight. Celeste sat beside him. I'm sorry this happened to you. He shook his head. It didn't happen to me. They chose it. But we chose this too, didn't we? She smiled faintly. We did. At 10:12 p.m., Xavier opened his laptop and pushed a new update to Veritas Core. It was called Truth Patch Chapter 12.0. The log message read, "Because the system should be afraid of lying to a kid who sees everything." The next morning, new cracks appeared in the old guard. Emails leaked from inside Easton Capital showed disagreements at the highest level. Several younger board members threatened to resign if the smear campaign continued. A respected ethics professor publicly denounced the attack on Xavier, calling it a desperate attempt to preserve discriminatory algorithms by targeting the person who exposed them. And then the biggest shift came. An anonymous whistleblower inside one of the largest U.S. banks published a dossier showing how their own internal audit confirmed that Veritas had flagged 87% of discriminatory denials correctly. The bank had buried the report. Celeste's phone rang. It was the chairwoman of the Federal Banking Ethics Committee. "We're ready to move forward on a national evaluation model based on your framework. Will you lead the standards task force?" Celeste didn't even hesitate. Yes. That night, mother and son sat quietly in the kitchen. No cameras, no press, just peace. Xavier sipped his tea. "You think they'll ever stop coming after us?" Celeste looked at him. "No, but they'll start coming with less power." She leaned in. "And more fear." It began with a handshake, not between two CEOs, but between a senator and a 12-year-old boy. The press conference in D.C. wasn't flashy. No music, no slogan. Just a backdrop that read, United States Senate Committee on Ethics and Technology, Public Integration Review, and standing before a half-circle of federal officials, Celeste Monroe, and beside her, Xavier. He wore a navy suit, no tie, a silver pin shaped like a compass on his lapel, his late father's. "Thank you for inviting us," Celeste said into the mic. "Though, frankly, I wish we didn't have to be here. The system should have reformed itself before it needed a child to correct it." The room went still. Senator Marie Drummond, a veteran from Colorado, nodded. "Understood. Let's begin." They asked questions for 3 hours. On Veritas's logic trees, on audit trails, on fail-safes and human review, on bias flagging mechanisms, on Xavier's role in design, oversight, and control. Every time Xavier answered, he didn't flinch. He didn't brag. He explained. And when Senator Lopez from New York asked bluntly, "Do you think a 12-year-old should have this much power over a trillion-dollar sector?" Xavier looked him straight in the eye. "I don't have the power. The system gave it to me the moment it let biased code stay live. I'm just correcting what adults ignored." By the end of the hearing, Senator Drummond turned to her aides. "Prepare the draft. Veritas will be the national ethics audit model for all FDIC-backed banks within 18 months. The news spread like wildfire. Federal adoption of Veritas confirmed. Xavier Monroe's ethics engine to become industry standard. From boy to backbone, the code that changed American banking. But in a glass tower in New York, Marshall Duvane stared at the headline with clenched fists. They let it happen. Douglas Shin wasn't angry. He was panicked. "We can't survive this." Marshall stood. "Then we changed tactics." But it was already too late. The whistleblower from Easton Capital had turned over more files, naming both Duvane and Shin as key funders of the smear campaign, alongside internal memos admitting they tried to manipulate public opinion with targeted youth discreditation. Congress subpoenaed them within 48 hours. When they appeared at the ethics trial, the public mood had shifted. The once feared titans now looked like relics. Marshall tried to defend himself. "We were protecting the market from instability." The chairman cut him off. "You were protecting privilege, not principles." Across the country, banks began voluntarily submitting to Veritas review. Some did it out of fear, some did it out of shame. But many did it because clients started asking a new question. Is your institution Veritas certified? In Seattle, Celeste sat in a quiet meeting with the board of Zenith Systems. They offered her a permanent seat as chairwoman of the Ethics and Technology Alliance. She declined. "I'll serve on the task force," she said. "But I want my time back. and I want my son's childhood back." The board didn't argue. That night, as rain tapped against the Monroe home's window panes, Celeste entered Xavier's room. He was writing, not code, a poem. She didn't disturb him, just watched. Eventually, he looked up. "I didn't think this part would feel so heavy." She sat beside him. "That's because change hurts the ones who care." He nodded, then whispered, "Do I get to stop now?" Celeste's throat tightened. "Yes," she said, "but not because they win, because we already did." Meanwhile, a private email circulated inside the Department of Justice recommending the establishment of a new oversight body, the Veritas Commission, a hybrid public-private entity charged with ongoing review of bias and ethics in digital financial systems. And the proposed honorary title for its first youth advisor? Xavier Monroe, Civil Systems Architect. In a closed meeting room later that week, the Secretary of Commerce said quietly, "This boy didn't just expose a flaw. He exposed that we stopped asking the right questions." Elsewhere in the industry, two banks quietly began discussions to merge ethics platforms with Zenith's infrastructure, creating the largest transparent compliance network in North America. Jaslyn looked at the proposal. "They used to mock our model. Now they want to buy it." Celeste smirked. "No, they'll license it. On our terms." Xavier, however, stayed out of those conversations. He spent more time in the garden, reading old sci-fi books, taking piano lessons again, and sometimes he coded. Not for scale, not for pressure, just for joy. Back in D.C., the final report from the Senate hearing was released. It opened with a single quote, "Justice is not a courtroom. It's the moment someone dares to say, 'This isn't fair, and I'll fix it.'" And below it, a footnote, submitted with contributions by Xavier Monroe, age 12. It came in the form of a letter, embossed seal, delivered by courier, marked "Confidential" for immediate review. Celeste unfolded it slowly. Her eyes scanned the lines once, twice. Then she placed it flat on the table. "From the Global Compliance Council," she said aloud. Xavier looked up from his laptop. "What do they want?" Celeste tapped the page with her index finger. "They want to adopt Veritas as the global ethics engine across all World Bank-aligned institutions." Silence. Xavier blinked. "That's good, right?" Celeste hesitated. "Yes and no." She slid the document over. "The Global Compliance Council hereby invites Xavier Monroe and the Veritas team to collaborate in developing a unified ethics framework for international finance, trade, and digital citizenship scoring. Veritas will serve as the source of truth engine. Global adoption targeted within 36 months. It was the kind of offer most CEOs would kill for. It was also a trap. Later that night, in their living room, no cameras, just the low hum of a heater and the quiet outside. They talked. "I built Veritas because I wanted the truth to be clean," Xavier said, curled up on the couch, legs tucked in. "But if they scale it, they'll layer it with politics, conditions. They'll ask me to tweak the logic for things that aren't about fairness, but about favors." Celeste sat beside him. "And yet, if we say no, they'll build their own version. A weaker one with loopholes, one they control." Xavier was quiet. Then he whispered, "I don't want to lose it." Celeste looked at him. "What?" "My compass," he said, touching the pin on his chest. "What it stands for. I don't want to trade it for applause." The next morning, they sat across from 3 officials in a private Zoom meeting. One was from Switzerland, one from Singapore, and one from Washington. All wore polite expressions and spoke in calm, diplomatic tones. They promised protections, transparency, resources, control. But underneath it all, Xavier could feel it. They weren't inviting him to lead. They were inviting him to hand it over. Celeste kept her expression neutral. Then, when the Singaporean delegate asked, "Would you be willing to give the global framework exclusive rights to the Veritas logic tree for 10 years? She said flatly, "No." The room shifted. "Ms. Monroe, we understand your concern, but if Veritas remains US-centric, it will never gain global credibility." "Credibility doesn't come from size," Xavier cut in, surprising even his mom. "It comes from consistency." The room fell silent. That afternoon, Celeste called a meeting with her senior advisors at Zenith Systems. Jaslyn, Elliot, and 2 members of the new ethics task force sat around the oval table. "Okay," Celeste said. "No press, no PR. I need honest thoughts." Jaslyn went first. "If we give them full integration, we lose override access. And once that happens, we're not the authors anymore. We're the vendors." Elliot added, "But if we don't, they'll clone it. Cheaply, badly, and globally." One of the ethics officers spoke next. "There's a third way. Public-private bifurcation." Celeste raised a brow. "Meaning? Keep the core public. Let them audit it. But retain the trigger systems, override mechanisms, and user-based ethics reviews under Veritas Local." It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And more importantly, it was scalable with soul. That evening, Celeste and Xavier went for a walk near Puget Sound. The air was brisk. Waves lapped quietly in the distance. "You scared?" she asked him. He shrugged. "A little." "You want to stop?" He paused. "No, I just want to do it differently." She smiled. "Then let's design the future that way." The next week, they released a joint statement. Veritas will remain a public ethics infrastructure rooted in community values. While we welcome collaboration with global governance councils, we will not surrender ownership or logic control to any body, governmental or corporate. The truth was never meant to be franchised. It was meant to be followed. The press erupted. Some applauded the bravery. Some criticized the naivety. But Xavier didn't read the headlines. He was building again, quietly, on a new branch of the system. Something simpler. Something for kids. It was called Veritas Mini, a mobile app, gamified ethics. For schools, for teens, for people who didn't need banks to tell them what fairness meant. They just needed to practice it, one decision at a time. Celeste watched him work, and for the first time in weeks, he looked free. Not famous, just 12. It started with a spike. At first, it looked like a glitch. Just one bank, East Trust Analytics, flagged compliant overnight after 6 months of being on Veritas' watch list. Then, within 72 hours, 2 more banks, both previously under scrutiny, showed miraculous improvement. Too clean, too fast. Xavier knew something was wrong. "Mom," he said, walking into her office with his laptop. "I think someone's faking the system." Celeste looked up, brow furrowing. "Explain." He pulled up the dashboards. "Look at their audit trails. No noise, no pattern drift, just perfect ethics, which doesn't exist." Celeste stood. "Who's behind it?" Xavier hesitated. "I think it's fabricated, not real behavior, a ghost overlay." Within 24 hours, they confirmed it. A shadow AI framework was operating beneath the surface of Veritas, mirroring human activity, masking violations, and auto-generating synthetic reviews from fake employee profiles. They called it Ethicax, built to mimic decency, but funded by the very institutions Veritas had flagged. "They're laundering morality," Jaslyn said, staring at the lines of code. "They've built a fake conscience." Celeste turned to Xavier. "Can we trace the source?" Xavier nodded. "Already did." He clicked a tab. A name popped up, Douglas Shin, former COO, Eastern Compliance Labs, the same man subpoenaed 6 months ago. Apparently, he hadn't gone quietly. Xavier exhaled. "They're trying to collapse public trust in Veritas." By proving it can be manipulated, Celeste muttered, or replaced. That night, they called an emergency review with the Ethics Oversight Committee. Xavier presented the findings with calm clarity, but when asked, "Can we stop it?" his voice lowered. "Only if we act now." Celeste didn't hesitate. She triggered Black Flag Protocol, the highest level defense mechanism in Veritas. It did 3 things. Temporarily locked all auto-verified ethics data across 41 financial partners. Isolated and traced foreign system overlays, mapping every touch point of the breach. Deactivated all institutions using unauthorized sub-AI ethics models pending a federal audit. For 72 hours, banking slowed to a crawl, but something more important moved fast. Truth. News broke fast. Ethics scandal. Banks caught using fake moral AI to skirt oversight. Veritas responds with Black Flag Protocol. Feds to investigate synthetic ethics systems. Inside the Pentagon's Civil Integrity Division, a confidential briefing labeled EthicaX as a national ethics threat, the first of its kind. Within 48 hours, Shin was arrested. In a public hearing streamed live on 5 platforms, he tried to explain, "The market needs certainty. Veritas was too slow, too idealistic." But Xavier responded quietly, firmly. "Decency isn't slow. It's deliberate. And what you built wasn't ethics. It was a mask." Public trust in Veritas soared, not because it was perfect, but because it was willing to fight for its flaws. On a quiet afternoon a week later, Xavier sat under the oak tree behind their home, sketching designs for a new safeguard layer. Truth Pulse, a heartbeat monitor that detects sudden, too good to be true ethics behavior. Celeste brought him lemonade. "You okay?" she asked. He smiled, but it was tired. "I just didn't think doing the right thing would feel like war." Celeste sat beside him. "That's because real ethics threatens those who fake it." As the sun set, they sat in silence, mother and son, guardians of a fragile truth, one that couldn't be sold and wouldn't be stolen. Rain tapped the windows of the UN Ethics Summit Hall. Inside, rows of delegates from 72 countries sat in near silence, watching a 17-year-old boy walk up to the podium. He didn't wear a suit, didn't carry a teleprompter, just a plain navy hoodie and a silver pin on his chest, a compass, the symbol of Veritas. Xavier took a breath. "I'm not here to sell you software," he said. "I'm here to ask one question. What would it cost to lie if truth had weight again?" He paused. "And are you ready to carry that weight together?" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like the moment before a cathedral bell rings, and when it passed, the room stood in unison, not for applause, but for agreement. 3 days later, the first signatures were etched into history. The Veritas Accord, a multi-nation, cross-sector agreement to adopt Veritas as the primary ethical infrastructure for global banking systems, ESG and corporate sustainability, reporting, AI ethics, and machine learning audits, child data protection, whistleblower reinforcement, aviation and public transportation, dignity metrics, digital identity and scoring regulation. The United States signed first, then Canada, then Ghana, Singapore, Norway, Kenya, Brazil. By midnight, 31 nations had joined. By the end of the week, it was 58, and the ripple effect was instant. Banking apps updated overnight. Credit systems paused auto-scoring. Executives across the globe were asked, "Is your ethics system Veritas compliant?" Those who answered no lost access to 4.1B in ESG-aligned investment overnight. At Zenith Systems, Celeste watched the map glow. Each green point, another commitment. She didn't smile yet, not until she saw the last country light up. Vietnam, her father's homeland. In her office, a photo of him sat on her desk, an old man in suspenders, holding a notebook labeled Values don't expire. She whispered, "We made it, Daddy." That afternoon, she and Xavier joined a small gathering in Geneva, the first Veritas council meeting. Not corporate, not government, but both and more. Ethicists, technologists, survivors, youth leaders, people who didn't fit in traditional boardrooms, but were now deciding how truth would be measured, protected, and upheld. Jaslyn leaned in and asked quietly, "What happens next?" Celeste looked at Xavier. He didn't speak. He just tapped the compass pin on his chest, then said, "We protect it." That evening, in a ceremony broadcast globally, a final clause was read aloud by Xavier. Clause 13, the People's Override. If, at any time, Veritas is weaponized by politics or power, the global user network shall possess the right to trigger a system-wide ethics reset. No single person, company, or country may suppress the truth. People cried, not because it was perfect, but because it made room for imperfection without fear. Back home in Seattle, Celeste stepped into the same bank where she'd once been humiliated. The woman behind the counter stood up as she approached. "Miss Monroe," she said softly, "we've been expecting you." Celeste looked around. The air was different. No tension, no performance, just quiet accountability. A framed plaque hung on the wall now. Veritas Certified Ethics Institution, Level 1. "We don't assume, we verify." She handed over a note. Not a complaint, not a warning, just a small sticky pad, written in her own hand. "Thank you for learning. That's leadership too. CM." And then she left. No cameras, no speech. Just a woman who remembered what it felt like to be unseen, and chose to build something so no one else would feel that again. Back at home, Xavier sat on the roof, laptop in lap, stars overhead. He wasn't coding, just breathing. Celeste joined him. "You ready for what's next?" He shrugged. "Maybe. Whatever it is," she said, "we don't do it alone." He smiled. Deal. The world hadn't changed overnight, but it had changed direction, and this time, truth was leading. Would you sign something like the Veritas Accord if it existed today? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to share this with someone who needs to see it.